I was born in Heidelberg, Germany. My father was in the United States Army and was stationed in Germany. And so my mom and my sister and my father all moved to Germany while he was stationed there. And then I was born there in the hospital in Heidelberg. So we moved back to the United States, and we moved to Bowie, Maryland, and we lived there while he was in Vietnam. And then when he came back, we moved to Oklahoma for a short period of time. And then when I was 3 years old, we moved to the state of Hawaii. I lived in Hawaii from 1969 till December of 1981. So like 12 and a half years, something. I was 15 and a half when I came to Kentucky. My parents got divorced shortly after we moved to Hawaii. So I grew up. My father went back to Asia and for the military, and my mother and sister and brother and I all stayed in Hawaii. And so I grew up there. There was obviously Hawaii is a very expensive place, so being raised by a single mother, we were pretty poor, didn't have a lot of opportunities in some respects, and had way more than others. Like, not everybody gets a chance to just go to the beach whenever they want, or go hiking in the bamboo rainforest and see magical birds in paradise, flowers and things like that. Eat fresh ginger out of the ground, eat fresh fruit, passion fruit and guava and mangoes and kumquats and pineapple and all kinds of stuff straight off the plant. So those are good things. Some of the hardships, there's a lot of racial prejudiceness in Hawaii against white people at the time when I was growing up. So I was a haole, a white person. And but they called me Kama'aina because I grew up there. I lived there pretty much my whole life. And so growing up with the people I went to school with, they knew me, but they would still call me Haole. And so we had to learn how to protect ourselves. Hawaii is a beautiful place. There's so many places where every island has a different topography. So you might have a desert and a rainforest, and you might have, there's beach, there's prairie land, there's high desert, pretty much anything you can think of, grasslands and things like that. It just really depends on what part of the island you are, because the way the winds blow and the mountains. I grew up on Maui primarily. When I was, I think in 1971, we moved to Maui. And on Maui, there's a 10,000 foot mountain called Haleakala Mountain, which means house of the rising sun. And so I actually grew up on that mountain in the town that was the last town before you started to ascend to the summit. So in Kula, Hawaii, and that's where I went to school, in Kula, when I was in elementary school. And for a little while I actually lived on right across the valley from the road that led up to the summit of Haleakala Mountain. So pretty high elevation. And there's magical things like black sand beaches and blowholes, and there are all kinds of legends. The Hawaiian people have rich stories and rich musical tradition and arts traditions, dancing and stuff like that. So it's a beautiful, neat place to be. One of the things that was interesting about growing up in Hawaii, I went to Kula Elementary School, and in school, most Americans learn about the history and the Civil War and the French-American War and the Indian and all of that kind of stuff. We didn't really learn about that stuff. We learned about King Kamehameha and Queen Liliuokalani, and we learned about Maui, the demigod, pulled the islands up from the boat while he was fishing, and things like that. Pele, the fire goddess, the goddess of volcanoes. And so when I was a kid, we would learn chants, different kinds of chants to the gods and the goddesses. We would do kind of the traditional Hawaiian things and some of the cultural things that were brought by the English when they tried to colonize Hawaii, like the maypole. We would do the maypole where you have the stringers that go out from the pole and you weave around each other and do that kind of stuff. It's a sort of dance. And we learned a lot about different cultures, especially there's a lot of Asian culture there in Hawaii, and of course Pacific Island cultures. So by Pacific Island, what I'm talking about is South Pacific, like the Tahitians, the Polynesians, Samoans, and that kind of stuff, Micronesians. And so there's a lot of those kind of people there, and a lot of people from Japan and China and Korea. And then at one point, a pretty large Portuguese population came in. In Hawaii, they call them Portuguese. That's a pidgin, which is kind of the language. Pidgin is a language that's spoken in Hawaii. It's English and a lot of other things. So we say, so for instance, if we're done, we'll say, "E pau," means I'm done, or "Pauhana" means we're done for the week. Growing up in this kind of situation, I can speak some Pidgin. I probably lost my accent, but when I go back there, it comes back pretty quickly because it was my formative years when I was learning how to do that. So I was in Hawaii growing up in the 70s primarily and into the early 80s. And so, in my household we'd listen to Tchaikovsky and Bizet and Mozart and Beethoven and Iron Butterfly and Earl Klug and Jean-Luc Ponty and Bing Crosby and just pretty much Bobby Vee. Anything you could really think of. There were no limits in our household. We could listen to all kinds of music. Grew up without a TV, so music and reading were our primary forms of entertainment, and playing games. We played Monopoly and that kind of thing, chess, checkers. And then the other thing we would do is go outside and play, and what a better place to do than Hawaii. Especially growing up in Kula, when I was a little bit older we moved to Lower Kula, and in that part it's kind of, I'd say, upcountry desert, so high desert, and so there's a lot of places where the water runs off, and it built these great ravines where you could hike and find all kinds of cool things like caves and unique plants and stuff. So I started band when I was in 6th grade, but I've always had music in my life, not just what we listened to in the household, but my mom played congas in a band. So when I was growing up, she always had drums around and stuff like that. And so for me, that was just a part of my life, part of my culture, part of my everything, growing up in Hawaii. I didn't actually consider going into music until high school. When I was applying for colleges, I was applying to do pre-med, and I could only get partial presidential scholarships and stuff like that, and the schools that I wanted to go to were more expensive than I could afford, because like I said, we were poor, and I didn't get any help from my parents because they couldn't. So, I should say from my mom. And so basically one day my high school band director said to me, have you ever thought about going into music? And I was just like, not really. No, I hadn't really considered that. And he's like, you should audition for a scholarship. Probably the best one I got at the time was at Murray State University, so I went there. Actually ended up going there for music. And then I was there for a year, and due to a bunch of life circumstances and stuff, I decided to transfer to the University of Louisville. Got another full ride scholarship, so I basically studied music. And then after 2 years there, during that time while I was at the University of Louisville, I marched in the Drum and Bugle Corps in Chicago, the Cavaliers Drum and Bugle Corps. And we got 3rd in the world in the Drum Corps International competition both years that I marched. And the teacher there was one of the teachers that I auditioned for in Montana, Jim Campbell. And so basically at that point I transferred schools to the University of Kentucky, where Jim Campbell had just started teaching, so I could study with him, because I really, really wanted to study with him. And just watching his life and watching what he does, I thought, that's what I want to do when I grow up. So I dropped my education major and started really focusing on things that I could do to get a college position, and practiced a lot, and here I am. This is what I do now. So I love music. It's a great career. It's not the best paying, but it pays in other ways. It's good for my soul, it's good for my heart.